met our third poet this fall down at Plymouth Rock, and at a holiday what most descendants of Europeans call Thanksgiving, but what Native Americans call Day of Mourning. And Susan was one of the people that actually read some of her poetry at Statue of Massasoit, and it really touched my heart. So here's something from a Native perspective. We know what's going on today. A lot of people are turning back to the Native peoples and their ways, their wisdom as a way of healing the earth again. So please give a warm welcome to Susan Wright.
To start out by eliminating one of those tremendous falsehoods that seems to spread around, because those lovely Hollywood films that we can't seem to get rid of and seem to keep floating about and influencing the minds of, unfortunately, altogether too many. This is a quote about the nature, the true nature of warriorhood. Being a warrior has nothing to do with the English word to war. That was an English translation, and she made some very valid points, which I quite wholeheartedly agree with. And she says, Americans have been raised on tales of brave warriors who are sometimes portrayed as noble victims of white depredation, but more often as bloodthirsty savages howling down in vengeance upon, quote-unquote, helpless white settlers. In these tales and movies, the basic nature of the warpath has been obscured, to say the least. Warriors are portrayed as primitive terrorists, and war is interpreted to mean, quote-unquote, modern warfare. The confusion is partly engendered by the language in English. The term war means soldiers blasting away at military targets for the purpose of attacking or defending territory, so-called ideals, or resources, mostly resources. In the tribal way, war means a ritual path, a kind of Tao, or spiritual discipline that can test honor, selflessness, and devotion, and put the warrior in closer, more powerful harmony with the supernaturals and with Mother Earth. And by the way, this did not exclude women, contrary to popular misconception. There were many, many, many women who have and who do follow the warrior path. And this is of profound significance if you're to understand part of what Native spirituality is all about and what it's not about. She also goes on to poignantly state that what is significant about the heroines of these stories, as about all warriors as distinguished from soldiers, is their attachment to self, to relatives, to earth, to sky. This is of crucial importance and significant differentiation from the concept of modern war and what that entails today. And as she puts it so eloquently, and rightfully so. As Native American political influence waned and Anglo-American influence increased, the Native world was buried in the deluge of immigrants from Northern and Eastern Europe and the ensuing flood of westward moving unsettlers. That's what I call them. I'm replacing her word. There wasn't anything too settling about them, as far as I'm concerned. Not only were vast populations imported from Europe and Africa, and smaller numbers from China to provide cheap labor and occupation forces, at the same time our numbers were, as she states, horrifyingly diminished. With loss of population on the native side and enormous increase on the western side, our land holdings, rights to self-governance, water, hunting, fishing, and religious rights by those who sought religious freedom were abrogated, and our most precious mainstay, the community of being with all our relatives, was severely curtailed. Not only were Native peoples held prisoner in forts, camps, and on reservations, that nice word for, prisoners of the little horrendous chunks of land that you can't grow anything on, among other things. Not only were they forbidden to practice their religions or they were prevented from doing so by having their mobility restricted. Most groups practice many religious ceremonies in places outside of the village or camp, and still that's true today, by the way. She's putting this in historical context, but this is still true. And of course, sometimes great distances away to make it downright impossible to really, almost nearly impossible to continue practicing. That was the idea. But the life forms and the land itself were altered beyond recognition. And in the course of white settlement, quote unquote, from 1850 to 1950, were all but destroyed. So you can imagine, between 1950 and the present, what the status is. Rampant alcoholism, rampant drug usage, tremendous, high statistics of suicide, beyond the likes of which, imagination, and it could possibly take you. And I know many Native people who are living on the reservations. I'm not, and I hear all the stories all the time, and often you don't have to hear the stories. You can see quite clearly what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I don't want you to take this as an us or them kind of presentation, and I just want to preface by saying that it is not. It is clear that we have to get in tune with what has happened to Native America. We cannot ignore it. We can't ignore it out of guilt. We can't ignore it out of shame. We can't ignore it, people being treated as invisible for 500 years. A Holocaust of over 30 million people, and a Holocaust never discussed. Guilt is not the answer. Shame is not the answer. The answer is think globally, act locally. I don't see much of the act locally. We talk about South Africa, and that's good. It's important to know what's going on in the world. We talk about all the different countries and what's happening, what kind of oppression, and it is all related. But damn, if you don't look in your own backyard first, what's the point? What is the point if we can ignore our own backyard? It's like it's invisible because we don't have daily contact. It's true, in the city you don't have as much contact. That doesn't make it as simple. But, some of the greatest concepts, some of the greatest involvements that people have don't involve anything simple that I've ever come across. In any case, I'll end the preaching, and that's my, but you get the idea.